Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Wild Portishead Show live here in various parts of the Southwest this evening. We are joined this evening by naturalist Ian Parsons. Got
Hello.
that right.
Thank you.
And also naturalist and twin neck guitar enthusiast Chris Sperring. And we've got a couple of topics I'm going to talk about tonight. But the hot topic, in every sense of the phrase, is the concern at the moment with this heat wave we are experiencing about long grass and rewilding and things like that. People having very real concerns that these may be potentially becoming a fire risk, especially after we've seen the fires that have been happening down in the southeast of England and around by London. And there has been some, I think it's fair to say, Chris, there has been some very heated, if you'll pardon the pun, some very heated reactions and talk about rewilding in the county. And, you know, people really almost turning against it because of what they are perceiving as, long grass and it being a fire risk and all these kinds of things. So, where shall we start? Where shall we start?
I think the best place to start here is there's a lot of perceptions going on. There's a wonderful thread that the Times have put out today, which is about basically in the future we're all going to have our gardens completely manicured. It's all going to have to be short grass, blah blah blah. The best person is the person we've got as a guest tonight to speak about this, not just because of his past experience in the forestry. I mean, come on. The last thing a commercial forest wants, is a fire. It's going to cause it massive problems. And the other bit of his experience, of course, is the amount of time he spends during a year in Spain, which is really going through major problems at the moment. And, of course, let's not forget that Ian has just got a book out this week. Can you flash it up?
Of course I'm going to flash it up. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
Seasonality. So I think what a great way to start is, Ian, if you can talk a little bit about the book and how it dovetails into what we're talking about this evening.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, seasonality comes out this week. It's being sent off to the distributors on Wednesday. It's, as it says, it's a personal account of nature through the seasons. It's about what you can see, what you can hear, but also how it makes you feel. It's my own account. It's based in Devon, which is where I am, but it's relevant to everywhere in the country. It's we've realised over the last few years how important having access to nature is, and throughout the year, nature's constantly changing, and this is not a journey through it. Nothing's perfect, and in Britain, nature's going through a tough time, and I'm an opinionated person, as you know, and I have my opinions in here. I don't agree with a lot of what's happening with our wildlife, but it's a positive book. It's uplifting, and it's my account on it. It touches on rewilding. I say in there about being an advocate of rewilding, but I'm also a realist, and large parts of the country aren't suitable for rewilding. It's more, certainly not on large scales, it's more about sharing, allowing nature in. And in the book I talk about a farmer near to where I am now who's put up a barn owl box in his barn. It's a working barn. He's got barn owls now in the box. He's allowed margins to develop around his field, so he's got barn owls. He's got food for the barn owls. They breed successfully there. He hasn't rewilded the farm, but what he has done is he's actually allowed nature to come in and share it. I mean, the photo that's up now is actually in Spain. That's on the edge of my village in Spain, and that's the public road going into the village. And you've got farmland on the right hand side, the other side of the stone wall, and you've got a reservoir actually on the left hand side of this tarmac road. But the margins have just been left to develop themselves, and you've got a real abundance. You've got lavender there. You've got a Spanish shrub called a ripfo. I don't know its English name. You've got the yellow flowers there as well. It's a real mixture of stuff that's just come up and has developed. It's a very small area, but it's a really important corridor, and it's full of life. It's full of the buzz of insects. There's corn bunting everywhere, a bird that we should have everywhere in the southwest, and we don't because of how we manage our land. And it's just full of life, and it's not a massive rewilding project. No one's chucked millions of pounds at it. It's just been left to get on. The productive farming's still producing, the reservoir's still producing, the road's still usable. This is a public footpath across farmland. Again, it's just been left. The sticky stuff in the background is an endemic to Iberia, but that could easily be Broome in this country. The wildflowers are fantastic. The birds there are fantastic. The lark song as you walk along there in the spring is just incredible. But it's just through productive farmland. But instead of not allowing any space for nature, nature's been given the space. And if you give nature the space, it will develop. The fire thing is a big one. I mean, in Extremadura in central Spain, it's 38, 39 there today degrees. 40 is a very common temperature in July and August. You'd have seen on the news the horrendous forest fires, as they're calling them, the wildfires that have been hitting the region. And it can be very, very scary. But fires will burn any material. Long grass actually is more often damper and cooler than short grass. You probably have saw some footage. I think the BBC was certainly repeating it. It was Spanish media footage of a poor farmer up in the Sierra de Culebra in Castilla y León in Spain, and he was trying to get his digger or tractor across a wheat field to try and dig a fire break in it, and the flames just overtook him. And his entire machine disappeared. He disappeared. Next thing you saw him leaping through the fence with his clothes on fire, running literally for his life. He was in a wheat field, massive expanse of wheat growing area. We're not going to stop growing wheat because it burns. Things burn. It's just how we've got to live with it. You know, we need wheat. Wheat's very, yeah, exactly. Especially at the moment. And wheat's a very, very dry crop. It's a really dry crop. So it will burn. It will burn. Often you'll find, certainly in Britain, willow scrub, for example, won't burn. And in the forest, it was a natural fire break. I fought forest fires in Dorset on the dry heathland soils there, where fire will literally run across the land. I mean, it's scary. And you can't fight it head on because you just can't stop it. And we've had fires that were stopped not by the fire breaks per se, but by the fact that on the other side of them were willow growing, big areas of willow scrub that just doesn't burn. And the fire would leap the fire breaks and scorch the leaves of the willow, but it wouldn't ignite. If that had been short vegetation, heavily mown and kept neat and tidy, it would have burnt. And the next stop was the A31, and then after that, a big housing estate. So that willow scrub stopped that fire becoming much more serious. I mean...
Just going to say the thing about willow, and Chris, you might, you both actually might know its relevance to the southwest is the tradition of burning the ashen faggot. You familiar with that? Is you take kind of like bundles of ash twigs, but you bind it with willow because the willow won't burn.
Yeah.
You see, and that's the thing is anyway. But that's on the side that shows you that willow is nature's natural fire break. I was going to just before you and Chris continue this, there were a couple of comments I noticed on some social media pages about rewilding, and a couple of comments said pretty much the same thing, that allowing grass to grow longer is irresponsible because what would happen if somebody was to fling a cigarette butt into it? Which is rather curious because nobody was actually saying, well, actually, the person flinging the cigarette butt is the person being irresponsible. As you say, things will burn. Hay will burn. So are we going to stop farmers from having hay ricks because they burn? Are we going to stop, wheat fields being sown and cultivated because wheat burns? Things will burn, but what Chris just said and what you just said, Ian, is that and we'll expand upon this. Is when you see, and I noticed this today because we were in Dorset, going through Somerset and Dorset. A lot of the verges in Dorset around by T. Lawrence's cottage, all down there, Clouds Hill, and You've got where obviously the local council have been mowing the grass on the edges of the verges by the road. You've got this very dry, brittle, yellow-looking kind of scrub, right? Where the machines haven't touched everything behind. You've got these tall, lush, green, for want of a better word, wet vegetation because it's retained the moisture. So if anything's going to go up, it's going to be the stuff that's cut is going to be like brushwood.
Because you've dried it. You've seasoned it effectively. You've seasoned the firewood.
Yeah. The stuff behind it isn't. And I think, Chris, you made this point to me this week about what people should do is if they're not convinced, what did you say that you suggest they do with long grass, to go out and look at some long grass? Put their hand in it.
You basically go out and part it, put your hand down inside, and you'll see how green it is underneath. So the moisture is retained, and we're going into August now where there'll be a lot more moisture in the atmosphere in any case. So there'll be more moisture. The whole of the understory of that long grass will get a lot greener. Now, let's change tack a bit. So we're very human so far, which is, I understand the reasons why. But for wildlife, that type of cover is absolutely paramount. And there is a case where you can have too much grass, so to speak. It could be too thick. And again, that's possibly because the natural parasites for the grass haven't had chance to emerge. So you can affect that. You can effectively break up the thickness of the grass by using grass parasites like yellow oat rattle, for example. And that will create space which will allow the flowers that that need more light to come through. So there's things that you can do without getting rid of your long grass. The other thing that I've noticed is that I've lived in Portishead all my life, and one of the things I can always remember from my youth, and it has nothing to do with my loss of hearing as I've got older, is the deterioration in the sound of the grass as time has gone by. And what I mean by that is grasshoppers and crickets. And I used to be able to crawl through the long grass as a kid and be deafened by the sound and stop and marvel at that sound. It's very difficult now, and that's nothing to do with my hearing. That's to do with the fact that they're just not there. They're not available. So there's a wildlife angle here, and it's Ian touched on it earlier about allowing nature to have that space. But that doesn't mean to say that we have to have continuation of long grass where people can't get to. No. And if you go back, and again, this is going to sound very boring, but if you go back to our folk hall meeting that we had in 2019, when we packed that hall out with the original specs of this idea, what we basically said there is here's a few things that we can do. It's over to you where you want to do it. And is there any enthusiasm for this? There was unanimous enthusiasm, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for people taking control of where it actually happens. And what's happened is that has been taken away from the people. In other words, it's been, and I know we'll get told that there were proper consultations, blah blah blah, that people didn't see. But at the end of the day, it's still going back to that problem, whereby if you give people ownership from the very beginning, and you say, here are the tools, here's the information that you need, where do you want to do this? We can make a real difference to yes, the wildlife, but also to your life. Because, of course, you only have to walk along some of our roads. They're now so congested, you can actually taste the fumes coming out of the vehicles, where if we have thick vegetation either side, not necessarily all the way through, but we know that that's being absorbed by that vegetation. So there's a human factor here as well. There's also the factor that it's good for our mental health as well to be within that natural environment. But you've got to give people access. In other words, if you have a big square area of land, which used to be public open space, and you say, right, that's all long grassland, people are going to get upset. They can't get in there anymore. They can't utilize that. Mow some paths through. Give them the opportunity to go in. have the centre bit that is perhaps cut, so that they can go and sit down and immerse themselves within that nature that's there. There are ways of doing this.
Well, this was Sorry, go on, Chris.
Sorry, I'll stop there because
I can just come in on that bit. You're saying about the grassland there. I mean, I go a lot to Rosemore, the RHS place in North Devon, and they've got fantastic areas of amenity grassland, just like many councils have in parks, in towns and villages and what have you. And they've allowed them to develop into some beautiful meadows. I mean, it's full of knapweed at the moment, just going over. It's the bees and butterflies and your grasshoppers and your crickets are there. But they don't just have it so that you have to walk around the edge of it and look into it. They've mown with a bit of imagination, meter strips through, windy little paths through it, so you can wander through these meadows, really experience the meadows. But the great thing, I was there on Monday, and it was these kids that down on holiday, and they were running through these paths, playing all sorts of games. They weren't trampling the flowers; they were sticking to the mown areas. They were loving it. It was really. It might be the first time they've ever had that opportunity to do that. And you don't have to have these big blocks where people feel intimidated about going in. You can, it's about sharing. Let's get people using it. Because if you want to get kids infused by wildlife, they've got to be exposed by it. And watching these kids running through this beautiful meadow full of lovely wildflowers, it was almost as high as they were, but they had their nice neat paths mown into it, and they were twisting, and they were done with imagination. And I looked at that and I sort of think there's no reason why the park in Exmouth, where I grew up, the big park, why that couldn't have had that instead of this grass that was mown within an inch of its life every couple of weeks. They could have had that. I'd have loved it as kids, as would everybody else have done. It just takes a little bit of imagination.
Well, I think this is part of the issue, is that it does require a little bit of imagination, and it just requires a little bit more planning and forethought. And I think half the time the problem we have is that you're dealing with, I'm going to use this phrase and I'm going to get into trouble for it, we're dealing with spreadsheet ecology, where a spreadsheet says it's now the 1st of July, grass must be mown. It's now the 4th of August, this must be done, this must be done. There's nobody seems to go out, look at a place and go, do you know what? That doesn't need doing. No. That doesn't need doing. That or it does need doing, but actually what we can do is, and I'll credit to North Somerset Council here. You'll know this, Chris, on the corner of Battery Lane, where you start going down the esplanade towards the swimming pool, there's a little patch of land on the corner, and they mow paths through it, but they leave big areas to just grow, right? That's how you do it. That's and they've even put a sign up to explain this is why we're doing this, right? I think the problem is in other parts of our town and other towns, not just in North Somerset but in other parts of the country, that local authorities, they know what they want to do, they're just very poor at communicating it with the public. And this is something, Chris, that you and I said at the Wild Portishead meeting back in August 2019. You've got to bring the public along with you. If you lose them, you've lost them for a while, almost not a generation, but it's very hard to then go back and try and claw it all back to get people back on board. And I think part of that problem is, and I'll let you two carry this on now, but I think part of that problem is, which is what we said was, when you think about it, how does nature work? By and large, nature works by being from the ground up, unless you're mistletoe, obviously, but it's from the ground up. Unfortunately, you get large organizations come in and they just try and do this from the top down. I'm sorry, but you can't grow anything in the air apart from mistletoe. But you can't. It doesn't work that way. And it's like, nature is actually pointing how you should be doing this. You see,
nature doesn't do prescriptions.
Sorry,
nature doesn't follow prescriptions.
Nature doesn't follow a spreadsheet. This is it.
No.
It's all there. And like I say, we've seen in the last week or so, we've seen the public being lost from the idea of allowing nature back into our lives and doing things which will encourage and assist nature. And we're seeing all that hard work and all that goodwill being lost because it's just not being communicated properly. It's not being carried out effectively. I think one of the comments that I saw this week, which just had me kind of like, agog, was that somebody complained that, oh, well, the thing about the long grass is that it's then full of insects and snakes. And it's like, yes, that's what you want. If you are, I mean, without sounding funny, but there was a news piece about the increase in people getting snake bites. Okay, in this country, it's going to be adders. They tend not to be fatal, but nobody wants to be bitten by a snake. Nobody wants to be bitten by a dog or a spider or anything else. But the point is, if we are getting an upswing in people who are seeing snakes or even getting bitten by snakes, actually, that's a success because we've actually managed to, get snakes back.
But what I will say, what I will say about that was that headline. I saw that headline and I thought, oh, brilliant. As in like this could be really taken to be a downer. I read the story. It was actually exotic pet snakes were the cause of the increase of snake bites, not wild snakes, not adders. It was the fact that people have been keeping more snakes. A lot of people brought snakes in lockdown, and there's been an upswing in the number of people getting bit by their exotic pets. It's got nothing to do with wildlife. Adders, in my lifetime, they have had a massive decline, huge decline. The number of actual snake bites, wild snake bites recorded in this country is four a year, and they're invariably young men that pick them up to look at them. And I have picked up snakes, but it's not something I would do voluntarily ever again. But it's that story was, the headline was there to create almost the fear thing, but when you actually looked into it, it was actually people's pet snakes. People were keeping venomous snakes. They're going to get bit by them. I mean, that's what happens.
I think the story I was reading was it was one of the wildlife trusts that had recorded an upswing in one of the kind of like the local grass snake population and things like that, and they were saying that because of the fact that grasses were being left longer, you were getting an upswing in grass snakes. You were getting an upswing in slow worms and things like that.
I mean, we've had more slow worms in our garden this year. It's fantastic for keeping the slugs down.
Yeah, but this whole thing about
poor old slugs not doing very well in this dry weather.
Well, I'm quite pleased about that, though.
Well, here we go. This is the controversial moment. Is three naturalists and people of an ecological bent now say good riddance to slugs.
I don't say good riddance, but I do enjoy watching the song thrushes smearing them across the stone to take off the slime and eat them before they eat my chard.
Well, yeah, sorry, slugs. Obviously, if you are affected by our anti-slug sentiment tonight, there is a helpline available at the end of the show. But no, Chris, we're going to go through some of the pictures we've got here, and we'll kind of like pick up on a few things. But before we do that, we've got a comment from viewer Faith. Hello, viewer Faith. She says, will the show be recorded? Ian's book sounds interesting.
Well, thank you.
Well, a yes on both of those things. The show is being recorded and it will be uploaded. It will be available on YouTube and Facebook, and you can even watch it on Twitter if you want. But it will be on high definition on YouTube. So yeah, it will be recorded.
Should we make sure that we say that Faith, obviously of Tony and Faith Moulin fame, are leading lights in the Yatton and Congsbury Wildlife Action Group, our colleagues there over in a community that way, just over the hill. And of course, I'll send out a message now to Faith. Hey, Faith, what you want to do is book Ian for a Zoom talk one night.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hoping the book is interesting. It's published by Whittles, and it's available now. You can pre-order on all the usual places. I mean, the NHBS, based down in Totnes Natural History Bookstore, fantastic resource. I think they've got probably the best price for it at the moment, and they've got some signed copies as well. So I'm hoping it is interesting.
Well, we will. I'm just keying that up at the moment, so we will bring up a link to that and also your book on it as we get towards the end of the show. We've got some more comments here, and we have one here from viewer Tim. And viewer Tim says, "Evening. As an ex-firefighter, the longer the grass, the less it sets in.
Yeah.
The shorter the grass, the deeper the burn. I am only talking from my experience in Dorset Heathlands." Yeah, Tim,
and that's where I spent a lot of time fighting forest fires, and it was the short vegetation that we had massive problems with, because the fire could be out as you could see it. A couple of days later, it would be burning again, because it just burns down into the roots. Whereas when you had the longer vegetation, it would run through it. It would run through the leaves, the vegetation higher up, and it wouldn't burn down into the soil. And we had huge problems. We had fires we were going back to day after day after day, and taking up the resources of the fire brigade to do that. And you know, it was especially when people had those really annoying things, disposable barbecues that were just transferring all their heat onto the ground and setting light to the ground below the barbecue, and it might not burst into flames straight away, but it would be burning. And yeah, that short vegetation was a real issue.
No, absolutely.
Is there, Ian? Do you know if there is a general blanket ban on barbecues out in the forests at the moment?
I don't know. I mean, I left the Forestry Commission 10 years ago now, over 10 years ago.
Just wondering if you'd heard via the grapevine.
I can remember the summer of '95 was particularly dry, and we had a big high fire risk, and we banned people from using barbecues. Not that it had a lot of effect, because people didn't think it applied to them themselves, but everybody else. And disposable barbecues were a nightmare. I can remember I was based on the Dorset-Hampshire border, and you'd spend all this time trying to put these fires out lit by these barbecues. You'd go into the supermarket in the nearest town, and they'd be selling them for 2 a penny. And you think, well, the people that are buying these aren't going to be using them in their gardens. They're going off into the countryside to use them, and they should be banned. They should just be banned. And I've seen this week, because of links from those barbecues to the fires that places in Britain have been experiencing, there've been calls from fire chiefs and what have you to say we should be banning these disposable barbecues. They're dangerous. They're dangerous.
But so can litter be, and that's one of the issues as well. Broken glass on direct sunlight onto dry ground.
Yeah, indeed, and that is a problem.
David Newton says Parliament considering banning barbecues. So we're not banning banning
disposable barbecues.
Yeah.
And they should do. They should do.
Yeah.
It's banning barbecues. Don't. We'll have we'll be on the front cover of the Daily Mail next. Nobody wants that. We're gonna go whiz through some pictures.
I thought he was going to say somebody's banning Parliament, but sorry.
That's the end of tonight's show. Good evening, Chris. We'll whiz through some pictures here, and then we'll come back and talk some more about Ian's book. I
thought it would interest some of the people in Portishead just on some of the ground where, for instance, it's not long grass, and nature is trying to fight back. So basically, the bare ground. This is a lovely plant. This is called yellow wart. This is again growing up through bare ground, basically trying to a classic recolonizer. Nature, I call this nature fighting back. One of the ideas that I had was to go around Portishead with a piece of chalk and just go around naming them all. And just showing people that there's no such thing as a weed. It all has a name.
I think people just don't like them appearing in places they're not used to seeing them.
And it opens up into the subject, which of course, our friends in Yatwag have been lobbying North Somerset Council on, and that's of course banning spraying Roundup throughout the district. And of course, there's as we know, what came out in the newspapers last week. It was found in America that I stand to be corrected on this, but I think it was 80% of people tested had traces of Roundup within their urine, something like that. It was incredible. And as we know, it's carcinogenic to people. There has to be another way of doing it. If you just run through the flowers, maybe we can come up with a way of solving this problem. That's vervain. again, that attracts a lot of pollinators to it. It's a very delicate flower. And again,
I was going to say, Chris, you say about that there. This is what we were talking about with it's, you know, people see pictures of very beautiful flower displays and they think that is going to be good for nature. They'll see something like this and they think that's a horrible weed, pull it up.
Yeah, well, that's red Barrett. That's red Barrettas, and Tony Moulin was actually showing me this today, growing in an area outside his house, which I did get pictures of, but not got time to put them up. It's where, for example, he's doing what I said earlier. So he's grown originally long, thick grass, and he's then sown in yellow oat rattle in order to promote a much richer, diverse. And he's put this in as well. I think he put this in. I don't know whether it came around naturally, but this is also a grass parasite. So in this particular area, it's not got much to parasite, but it's just showing you it's colonizing. So, and again, it's nature coming back, given the chance. And I think that's actually I can't see a close up of that. My glasses are failing me. Go on to the next one. I think that's a red nettle. That's a century. Yeah. Again, that basically is coming up through a bit of waste ground, and it's absolutely beautiful. It's just going over at the moment, but for all the people in Portishead, if you get an opportunity to see this flower, it's absolutely beautiful, so delicate, and it's one which it's kind of dotted around. It's not incredibly common, but it's dotted around the area, and it's one definitely to look out for within our urban setting.
Absolutely. And then we have some more of it.
That's the same thing. Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful little delicate flowers. And am I right in thinking that these are incredibly useful plants for pollinators?
Yes, they will be. Yep. And it also has a bit of human interest to it as well, because of course every part of this plant can be used in some form of medicine. But before you before you go and do it, please check with the correct authorities of which bits are used for what. But I hear it's pretty good for headaches. It's particularly good for diarrhea, though I've never actually tried it myself.
Well, I'll just say, if people go running out to start using this, then, you know, if they go trotting out to use it. But anyway, we've got here thistles, and we've got a bee. I'll tell you a story about thistles. I haven't got the photograph here because I didn't have time today. But I've had 2 thistles suddenly turn up on the entrance to my drive. They're magnificent. I'm sure some people think they look like hideous weeds, but they are not. They are things of beauty, and I wish I could cultivate these in my garden more. I think they're fabulous.
I've got a spear thistle it's turned up in the garden. It's taken 2 years to flower. They're biennial, and the flowers are opening now, and they are full of little bees and hoverflies. And yet it's a notifiable weed. It's something that we've got to control for the good of the nation. And it's a brilliant pollinating, a brilliant plant for pollinators, and it's a beautiful plant. The thistle family are terrific for wildlife.
Yeah, and come the crunch, when there's not much food around, we might just need it for something else. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, I actually I'm still trying to grow Niger thistles from Niger seed.
Right.
And I do get some success with the seeds actually sprouting, and it all looks absolutely splendid. And then the birds come down and eat all my seedlings. So.
Yeah, I think the thing in the photo is actually a knapweed.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
I think, and a carder bee on the top of it.
Yeah.
St. John's wort.
Yep.
Hypericum.
Again, it's got lots of obviously there's lots written about St. John's wort. You've got to be very careful with it if you're using it as a medicine, but it's a great pollinator as well.
Yeah,
I think it was used. I think an extract was used as an antidepressant, wasn't it? But I just think seeing the flower is an antidepressant.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I've got. I'll put a photograph up on the page after the show. But I've got a tub in the garden which has got St. John's wort growing in it, and it's now it's absolutely gone mad. So much so, I think I'm actually going. Not only am I going to actually have to dig it in somewhere in the garden, but also I might even have to take some cuttings and try and cultivate them to try and get it to move around the garden a bit more, because it's utterly fabulous, and it is absolutely, you've just got so much wildlife in it. It's unbelievable. And then we have here
That's the small copper, beautiful small
beautiful
copper.
butterfly.
Yeah.
And what's that actually
available at the moment?
Yeah, and what's that actually sitting on?
Do you know what? I can't remember what that was on.
That's not me.
No, I can't remember what that was on.
Right, okay.
Go on, Ian.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm colourblind. That's my excuse.
No,
Faith, right. Where are you?
Right. Well, you don't need to be colourblind with this one because there's no colour in it.
No, that's the magnificent labyrinth spider as well, which you can find around the area in any neglected where there's a bit of vegetation. They'll basically bind. You can see there's dead grasses here, and it's bound together, and there's a lovely tunnel down to there. If you look on the very edge of the web, you can see where it's discarding its prey. Beautiful, big spider.
Well, I've still got in my kitchen window. I've still got a false widow spider that's happily coexisting with. Well, it's coexisting with me fine. It's not coexisting very well with any other flies that come in because she eats them. But no, absolutely perfect. Again, false widow spiders. That's good. That's a good example of where the media whipped up a storm against them. People were in a panic. They'd see anything, from a daddy long legs to a wolf spider, and they all thought they were false widows. The simple truth was that people who have bad reactions to a false widow spider bite probably have a bad reaction to any spider bite.
And probably bees as well. I mean, if people are that sensitive, they're going to be allergic to a lot of things.
It's like, some people, I can eat a Snickers bar. I could murder one right now. But, other people, give them a Snickers bar, it'll kill them. It's not so much the, it's not the spider's fault. It's unfortunately we as human beings, we have very different reactions to things. But, and there we go. There we go. That's the picture of the thistle I was looking for.
That's teasel. That's teasel coming into flower there, gorgeous, and that's next to the century as well.
Yeah.
So again, these are both on waste ground, but you can see the individual flower heads there, almost like horizontal planing there around the equator of the teasel head, and that's the epitome, if you like, of the plant that's called the weed. And yet, of course, we know it was so important during the textile industry, and it's also when it dries. Obviously, the seed heads that are formed inside are incredibly good for the birds during the winter, and once the birds are finished with it, you can take the top off and use it as a comb.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's we've got teasel. It makes a great display as well. A dried spent flower head is a beautiful architectural thing, decoration in your house. I mean, they're always a buzz with insects. Bumblebees love them, and like you say, in the winter time, I mean, things like goldfinch, they really do flock quite literally to teasel. I mean, it's the seeds are highly nutritious. It's a brilliant plant.
Yeah, that's noticeable. We've got Faith on watching tonight, but it's noticeable if you walk on the section of the strawberry line between Yatton Station and Congsbury. There's one section there that is quite heavy in teasels and thistles and things, but you walk along there, and then all of a sudden, all you hear for a few hundred yards is just that diddly of goldfinches everywhere.
Yeah.
Just absolutely stripping these things bare. But as you say, the ones I've got are just so many different kinds of bee on them. Like I say, hoverflies. It just absolutely fantastic for wildlife. It just seems to be the go-to wildlife plant, really.
It is. It's a great plant.
Yeah.
And don't forget the thing is, if you've got it in your garden like we have, there is a tendency it will try to take over. It spreads very, very fast, and the thing to do is to manage it within a garden situation, so you don't eradicate it, just manage it.
And I'll tell you what you can do as well. If you cut it down, the stems are hollow. If you stack them into tie them into like a round shape with the sort of the holes sticking out, you'll get all sorts. It's a bug hotel. You make yourself a bug hotel out of the plant that's growing in your garden.
Brilliant idea. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Now, Chris, we're going to return to. I feel like I'm trapped in the day the Earth caught fire here, because that's a film I watched last week and thought, for a 61-year-old film, that seems oddly prescient. But we're back to the effects of the heat on woodland, and this is Western Bigwood, isn't it?
It's fair to say it's the effects of not much of the heat was getting down here, because this is Western Bigwood, and it was fascinating to on the really hot days to be outside the wood and then go inside the wood. The temperature drop was absolutely incredible. So proving a point of how important our tree cover is for us as well as other things. But this is to do with Ian will elaborate more on this. But basically, the effects of the lack of water are not just during the summer. They started before the summer. And that's important to remember. So that a lot of this is Dog's Mercury, which has basically died away. But it's interesting that if you go to the next picture, a lot of the tops of the trees, the leaves, are now falling. So I'm reckoning, and Ian will confirm this, that this is possibly to do with the trees saying, hang on, we haven't got much water, we need to do something about this. But also at the top of the trees, it's the amount of sunlight that they are getting, which would be rather a lot at the moment. So I'm going to pass over to Ian now.
I mean, I don't know the site, but I would say that's symptomatic of a lack of water getting to the tree's roots. It's just come out today on the news that it's been the driest start to a year rainfall wise since 1976, and that will have an effect. What you're seeing with plants suffering in very dry conditions now isn't because of a few days last week where it got to silly temperatures. It's because we've not been getting rain. It may also be that woodland, something's happened with the underground aquifers. Maybe there's, I don't know, someone's draining them to water crops, or a golf course, or drainage ditches have been cut in for development. All sorts of things can affect the hydrology of a woodland. Trees will lose their leaves when they're under stress. Trees are very economical with everything they do. So if a tree's under stress and it's because of lack of water and it's losing water through its leaves through transpiration, it will shed the leaves. I mean, it's something that trees will do. That does look very symptomatic of water stress or lack of water stress on those trees. It would be interesting to know what's happening around the woodland in terms of ditches and things like. It doesn't take much to interrupt a natural aquifer or a spring line by doing things that can be some distance away, or it could just be that we just have had very little rain this year and the trees are reacting to it. They're doing it to survive. Those trees aren't dying necessarily. They're cutting back and they're waiting for good times to come again, and then they should hopefully spring back into life.
No, the thing is, Ian, that this particular area, which is in Chris's, literally his neck of the woods, is an area that is currently under threat twofold from the potential of two developments, one up on the top of the hill and one on the lower slopes. And what you said about that, there can be external factors that will affect the woodland, will affect the trees. I think it's no secret to say that myself and Chris are absolutely trying to make sure that these developments, don't happen, because they will have a disastrous effect on Western Bigwood.
It's very easy to damage the hydrology of the soils in an area, and the effects to be felt some distance away, because water flows, and if you interrupt it or you drain an area, you can literally cut off a water supply for another site some distance away.
Yeah, without putting words into your mouth, Chris, was that a fair summary?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think that what Ian was saying, obviously we haven't got the ditch systems around Western Bigwood like we would have on the lower parts of the valley. So and not much has changed recently. So I would say that what Ian is saying about a lack of water for a very long time would be the issue there. And as far as what you said about potential developments of the future, then there's lots of reasons why that shouldn't go ahead. But that's just another one, which I think we should make sure that the current people looking at that are fully aware of.
Yeah, I think just to go off on a side tangent here at the moment is one of the things that we have talked about in the past, and I know it's a kind of like a pet subject of yours, Chris, is wet woodlands down on the levels. We've got we are, I think we are the pretty much the northern outermost edge of the Somerset levels in many respects. But we do when it rains, we do suffer terrible flooding in the town, and especially round by Gordano School and around there where we've got fields and everything. We do have all the reens down there. We do have marshland. We do have farmland and whatever. But all that along there, if there was a system and a program of planting and creating wet woodland, that would do a lot to soak up all that excess water that can cause problems with flooding on the main road.
It's always amused me how people don't like wet woodlands. How much of our wet woodlands have we lost, Ian?
Virtually all of them. I mean, the thing is with wet woodlands is they're a great sponge. They soak up that water. We all know as naturalists and ecologists that wet woodlands help prevent flooding. The government know it. The planners should know this. They do know it. They just choose to ignore it often. The other thing with wet woodland, going back to the topic you opened the show with, is that it's a brilliant fire break. It won't burn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we have a picture here of a very angry local.
Kung fu fighting.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say that's Chris, this is something you and I think probably Ian as well. It's this whole thing about planting woodland, but then planting woodland and trying to fight against nature by covering it with plastic sheaths that will then eventually they'll either fracture because of UV light, they'll fracture because deer are trying to eat them to get to the saplings, or they're being chewed up by dogs. One way or the other, what we end up with is these managed artificial woodlands that are trying to be established just end up covered in sharp, nasty plastic shards, which is as far away from the idea of rewilding as I think you can get. By you're creating plastic pollution in the name of saving the planet. No, rethink.
Well, yeah, I mean, when they met with us, Jonathan, North Somerset, they admitted that the first lot of planting basically was dramatically affected by, and this is going back 2 or 3 years now, was dramatically affected by the lack of moisture coming out of the sky. And I highlighted the fact then that wouldn't it be interesting to have a direct comparison to what I refer to as natural regen, whereby the grassland is allowed to go to scrub, to go to long grass, then go to scrub, then you get trees coming up through the scrub. How much different it would be if we actually gave nature a chance. I mean, really, this isn't my subject. This is right out of what Ian would say in any case, as he's the great tree expert. But I just feel that when having heard Ian talk about the effect of a lack of water on mature trees, then the effect on trees that are planted, I would say planted artificially, is going to be enormous, and your losses must be huge. Am I right, Ian?
Oh, I mean, you're buying outsourced trees from God knows where. I mean, there's all sorts of environmental implications in the fact that these these trees are being outsourced and being transported in long distances, sometimes from abroad. And then they are literally chucked in the ground by the cheapest tendered contractors, and bare root, chucked in the ground and left, and they instantly dry out. Invariably, that ground's been sprayed with a herbicide to kill all the competing vegetation. That dries the ground out even more, because going back to what we were saying about vegetation being damp if you put your hand in it, if you blitz it with herbicide and leave it, it just dries out. The soil desiccates. Those trees have got no chance. I mean, I've got some great photos of an industrial estate on the edge of Exeter, where on one side of this cycle path they put in was land that wasn't part of the industrial estate, and it was cut back to put the path in. It subsequently just rewilded itself, if you want to use that expression. Brambles have come up, willow have come up, and now growing up through are oak trees and hawthorns and ash trees, trees that they've tried to plant on the other side of the path on a bank that they sprayed with herbicide, got some outsized source trees that were maybe 2 or 3 foot high, chucked them in the ground, and every single one of them is dead. The plastic tubes are still there, looking lovely, but the trees are dead because they've dried out. If they had just left that bank, hadn't sprayed it with herbicide, that bank would look like the other side of the path, because nature can grow trees far better than we can. It's been doing it. At the end of the day, we evolved in trees, okay? Nature can grow trees better than we can. And for some reason, we have this I don't know what it is, this obsession with thinking we can do better. And putting trees that have already started to grow, that have been ripped out of the soil that they were growing in, and chucking them in other soil without any fungal associations being built up, without any other vegetation there that actually keeps that moisture in the soil, you're doomed to failure. You are doomed to failure.
This is something that Chris mentioned at our Wild Portishead meeting back in 2019, and this was one of the things that we were very keen to do until another authority announced they were going to do something about tree planting, and it kicked our idea into touch. But the idea was that you are husbanding local saplings that have grown up naturally in the area. You husband them, and then you just relocate them. If you're going to artificially, if you're going to plant trees, then you go for the ones that are actually growing in the area and just move them along a bit. Move them to an area.
Trees are adapted to local conditions, and
exactly.
You start almost getting subspecies of trees because they're growing in a certain condition. And me, I'll mention white beams at some point or other in the evening. And in the west of the country, we have our own endemic native white beams that have evolved in these areas. That wouldn't happen if we manage woodlands like we seem to manage them now, by bringing in trees left, right, and centre from all over the place and chucking them in. Trees are adapted to the conditions that their parent trees have lived in and produced their seeds. And if you try and take trees out of that and put it in a completely different soil type, soil acidity, it's going to struggle. It really is going to struggle. I can remember Chris ringing me up and telling me about that idea of getting people to do that, and I remember thinking, what a brilliant idea that was, because not only is it using local trees, but you're bringing about ownership to local people about their wild areas. They're having this tangible thing that they've done, they can go back and see and take pride in. And if you take that away from people, they're not interested.
Well, I think at this stage we will say to the new leader of North Somerset Council, Steve Bridger, that we're still very keen to take that idea forward, Steve. So if you want to do it, come and talk to us. We'll talk. Is that a fair enough thing to say, Chris?
Absolutely. Yeah. Steve has been talking to us via social media, and I think we should be in a position where we can call, perhaps if they don't want to do it across the district, we can just say in Portishead, right, let's just hold the damn thing. There's a lot of anger, and there has been a lot of anger. And we're often the ones that the public turn to and say, this was your idea, it's your fault, blah, blah, blah. And we go, hang on a minute. This is not what we wanted to do. It has nothing to do with us whatsoever. And so what we can do is have a stop, a rethink, maybe even go to your idea, Jonathan, and have another public meeting. bring all the old stuff back out and say to the public, right now, this is your project. And it really is your project.
Yeah. It
And
needs a reboot.
I'm going to steal the words from a past councillor. What we should get the council to do is only facilitate it.
Facilitate it. Just going to say, Ian, this gives you an idea of when things go right and when things go wrong. This is an area of Portishead where this was all chopped back about 8 weeks ago. There were trees there, there was hedgerow, everything. This was all knocked back to do with the reopening of the railway in Portishead. What's happening to the railway, Chris?
It's not happening, mate.
There we go. Right. But the thing is I went down there and photographed and catalogued this, and the amount of young saplings that were coming up that were just now completely taken down to the ground and everything. You had an area that was, a perfect example of something that had rewilded. It had left to grow out. It had established. There were trees. There were hedges. Might not have looked tidy, but it was exactly what nature needed. When I went down there the next day to photograph and catalogue all this, I couldn't hear a thing.
No.
Nothing.
I mean, I'm not really sure why it was cut to help a railway, but I'm sure.
Well, the railway line is actually much farther back than you can see in that picture. I couldn't get an answer out of the contractors to say, well, why are you doing this work now at the wrong time of year, and why are you doing it so extensively? And their answer was, this is just what we've been told to do.
And why cut it at that height doesn't make a lot of. I mean, it's just. I don't know. I'm looking at that very confused. I mean, it would have been a perfect tree nursery, and the trees growing there would have been local, and they'd have been adapted to the conditions. They'll be back. I mean, as long as they didn't spray it. The thing you often see is landowners and councils in particular doing that to a lovely bit of scrub to then plant it with plastic wrapped outsourced trees.
Yes.
We've got that down Battery Point, haven't we, Chris? That you've got the wood at Eastwood wants to expand out, but it's not being allowed to because they're planting trees in plastic tubes in order to get more trees. Honestly, Ian, it does not make sense, but
it does your blooming head in, mate.
It does do your blooming head in. Right, you mentioned NHBS, and I'm just going to bring up a link to their website here, because I've just while we were doing this, I was having a quick look on their website, and it's got to be said there are some really good books here actually. And yes, if you type into the search engine Ian
Parsons,
the Ian Parsons Project, great band. There we go. So what have we got? There we go.
Seasonality, and of course there's the Vulture book as well, which I wrote a couple of years ago on the left hand side.
Let's go through all of his books. Come on.
In what order, Ian? In what order?
Well, the one to the left of seasonality is there was that one. The vote is a year's birding in Extremadura, which is about the birds that you can see in Extremadura, which is obviously a very big birding destination in Europe. And then the other book is a year in the life, if you like, of the vultures of Extremadura, which are birds that I have a strong affinity with. Vultures are fantastic birds, and they're a natural part of the ecosystem, and they do. And there's a hoopoe, lovely bird, and they do a fantastic job. That's my street. They do a fantastic job of keeping the environment ticking over, the ecosystems working. And our big problem with everything we do is that we interrupt those natural processes, and be that by using a veterinary drug that kills vultures, or draining areas of land to stop the natural hydrology of the area, or cutting scrub for a railway line for some bizarre reason. By us interrupting these processes, we cause a lot of damage. And
I think a quick look at your seasonality book here, because there are some. Oh, there's no pictures in there. There we go. But
spoiler alert.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
No,
But,
I mean, I think there's over 60 colour photos in it. So
there are over 192 pages and 60 colour photos. Australian Arc, is that what he was?
that's
Ian?
not me. No,
No, okay.
no, that's not
Ian
me. But I'll take
Right, yeah.
I'll take the royalties.
Ian Parsonson. That's obviously somebody from your Scandinavian branch of the family.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Ian Parsonson. Well, yeah, there we go. That's on. That is, folks, on nhbs.com. And I know it's probably too early to start talking about Christmas, but I actually think I think Ian's new book on seasonality would make a very good Christmas present for for somebody you know.
It's a relevant look at wildlife around us, and it's about the feelings you get from it. It's you can watch wildlife, you can see it, you can listen to it, you can hear, but it has an effect on you, and we're realizing more and more just how good wildlife is for us. If we go back to that St. John's work, seeing them in flower is a great antidepressant. You don't have to concoct something from it. Just seeing these flowers growing, often against the odds in places, in places where you might think nothing's going to grow. Seeing them is great for you. It lifts the soul, makes you feel good.
No, I mean, I've got growing in my garden. I've got honeywort, which comes up every year. It just, I don't know where it comes from, but it just comes up, and that's a fabulous plant. I've actually got, I can't find the picture at the moment, but I've actually got growing on the lower slopes of my garden. God, I sound so posh. The lower slopes of my garden, I've got wild sweet peas. And these have just exploded. I mean, if you see them before they flower, you just think, oh, that's a weed, right? You let them go. I'm going to see if I can try and find the photograph. I can't do it. But you let them kind of like you let them carry on. I've now got this tumbling down the it's like a rock steps that lead up to the pond. I've got this absolute a carpet of wild sweet peas.
Wow, beautiful.
Absolutely brilliant. And I also got popping up in the garden everywhere else. I get nigella. I get sunflowers from where some of the birds eat my sunflower seeds and poop it out in the garden, which is good because I try growing sunflowers and all I end up with is keeping the slug and snail population well fed. And actually that was a good point. We were just going to say about the about the whole thing about trying to protect trees is when I went down and had a look at that. I'll pull up the picture again. When I went down and had a look at that area around by the railway line where they'd gone in there and blitzed it, is where they've been chopping back some of the blackberry bushes, all that and whatever. In the middle of those blackberry bushes, there were young saplings that had started to come through.
Well, they're nature's tree shields, aren't they? Tree protectors.
Exactly. So
who needs plastic?
Who needs plastic? Well, we're overshooting a bit here, but we'll just run on for a few more minutes. And I'm just going to say that we are trying to kind of like say when it comes to managing any of these wildlife projects, that you've got to get people on board. You can't exclude them from the decision.
At the end of the day, also, there's councillors watching this. We know that, and they've got to know something that we've said before until we're blue in the face. Is that actually, if you involve the public, not only if you've got a project that's being carried forward that is being carried forward with respect, also. At the end of the day, you are saving those people, the taxpayers, money. You're saving their money. Where if you do anything else, it's costing money. Well, and when we move on politically, you're almost guaranteed that there is going to be one heck of a lot of cutbacks coming.
Yeah. I'm just going to say, Chris, that one of the things one of the criticisms I've seen this week, which I think is it's probably funded, it's probably rooted, if you pardon the pun, it's probably rooted in a little bit of truth, but I think it's also rooted in a little bit of misunderstanding or misinformation, is people say, rewilding, it's just an excuse to save money, right? I wish it was, actually. I genuinely wish it was, because I'm like you. I think that if you actually kind of like slash natural environment budgets, and actually had to really concentrate on
A
what
ground
rewilding.
up approach. Yeah,
Exactly.
it would work. It would work.
Exactly.
And that sounds ridiculous, but it's nature doesn't cost the earth.
No. And when I was in forestry, the biggest cost in producing commercial timber is planting. And if you, to grow certain types of trees, you have to plant them. But if you're looking from a wildlife point of view, you don't have to have that cost at all.
Yeah.
Nature does it for free.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so I hope all the taxpayers out there are listening to that, and I hope all the councillors as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I say, we've said this before, and we've said it again. We're not trying to work against anybody here. We're trying to work.
No.
We're trying to work with them, and we're trying to work, for them to make sure that people do get to enjoy the benefits of wildlife, and wildlife gets to enjoy the benefits of wildlife. This is the thing: is we're trying to. This was what we said at the meeting 3 years ago. Try and make Portishead a wildlife-friendly town. And part of that is also just trying to make sure the public understand why certain things are done, so that they're not kind of, going under.
And if we had somebody from even our local medical establishments, they would be saying, and it's a benefit for people as well, mentally and physically. And it's interesting that Scotland is upscaling their nature prescription.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before we go tonight, I will I'll ask you both if you've got any other business. But before we go tonight, here is my any other business. And again, this is a classic example of how, what nature can do. Is I was in a large local historical property, I think is the best way of calling it, and I was having my tea, a cup of tea and a flapjack, and I was sharing it with this chap who was just kind of like fluttering around, and people would chuck him a bit of whatever, and he'd be eating or whatever. I think he's a juvenile robin, probably a young one from this year, just going through looks like he's going through his first kind of coat or whatever. But the staff said, "Oh no, he comes and goes. He can fly in, he can fly out. He's just decided this is a great gig, free food, brilliant."
And what a great thing to experience.
Yeah, I mean, I was sat there and I literally looked over my shoulder. I mean, if you can see this, literally, like here, if I you can't see him. My cat is sprawled out on the chaise longue there. I literally just turned around and there was this robin, and he was just like, I'm like, right, I'll go and get another flapjack, and it's, and
it's good for business.
Sorry?
Good for business.
Good for business. I think he's a plant, actually. And I have an affinity with robins. I think we all tend to. They're very gregarious and curious birds. They're always called the gardener's friend. But no, I've got a great affinity with robins. And if I see one and it's taking an interest in what I'm doing, it does. It does that. It just lifts you up completely. So,
maybe that's one of the things that we've been losing, and that will be because of legislation. Because when I was young growing up, I had lots of contact with wildlife, with animals, and now some of that is frowned upon, and some of that is even illegal. And that's something we need to address. We need to address the fact of not saying remove protection, but we need to address how we allow those links, those actual links to wildlife, to still continue to happen. And they were crucial for me and my establishment.
No, absolutely. Chris, we will talk about this before we go.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping that we've got swifts in our high street, in Portishead High Street.
Brilliant.
And I'm hoping that next year we will bring the Portishead Town Council on board with us and the people, and we will start our own town swift project. What I'd like to establish, and if the council and the people so wish, is that we've already got a test box here at the house at the moment, ready for next year, that we'll get some Swift boxes in, place them up on buildings, and have some of those boxes with cameras in, so that the people can enjoy watching the Swifts, and we can start monitoring them year by year. I think we've got a pretty good population of Swifts at the moment, but obviously we don't know too much about the past. But the time to start monitoring them is now.
Yeah, Chris,
it's a project to look forward to.
No, absolutely. No, that's utterly brilliant. And Chris, I'm going to ask you, what do you think is the most numerous bird in our high street?
Sorry,
what do you think is the most numerous bird in our high street?
It's a trick question, isn't it?
No, it's not. I'd be curious to know what you think it is against what I think it is.
I see. Okay. Well, at the moment, if I was to walk through the high street, it would be the Swift.
Okay.
Wow.
I'd say it's goldfinches.
Wow. Two good birds for a town.
The actual high street.
Goldfinches. That's all I hear in the high street is goldfinches. I just hear that diddle-dit, diddle-dit, diddle-dit.
If I was to walk through the high street, even now, looking at the light as it is, I would hear the screaming overhead.
Okay.
But they're not long to go. They're not long to go.
No, they'll be gone soon.
We're going to have to go out there.
The reason why Ian in the autumn goes back, obviously, I think it's September he's going back. Ian's going back to Spain. Yeah, he follows the Swifts back.
Yeah.
We are going to have to go down the high street, Chris, and we're actually going to have to film and record and see this.
Yeah.
Do it next week.
How about Ian saying something about these holidays he puts on in Spain?
Go on,
do you want to advertise your holidays?
I've actually stopped doing them, Chris.
What?
There you go.
I took the decision. This year was the last year when I was guiding people out there. I've decided. I think COVID's made a lot of people think, and what's been happening with all the travel as well. It's just started to make things very complicated and very difficult. And so I decided that I would pause probably for quite some time before I run others, unless someone comes in with a very good offer. But it's and also I had to question, was I right in encouraging short haul flights to areas? I mean, I take the ferry. I take the ferry to Spain. I live relatively near a ferry port here in Devon, and I catch the ferry, and I avoid flying. And it was a few issues, but certainly flying was one of them.
Fair enough. Quick message from Faith here. She says, we hope to have a Yakwag Swift project next year too. Excellent.
I would recommend reading Swifts in a Tower by David Lack. I think it came out in the 50s or the 60s. Yeah. And that is a fantastic book. He also wrote a brilliant book on robins as well, Downing Dartington in Devon. But yeah, Swifts in a Tower, it will give you really good ideas on what you can do to attract those to those boxes.
Swifts in a Tower by...
I think it's David Lack.
David Lack, got it here. Swifts in a Tower by David Lack. I'm going to say a book that I'll lend you my copy, actually, Chris. And I've forgotten what the book is called. And it was a book, Birds in a Cage. Have you ever heard of this book, Birds in a Cage?
No.
Written by Derek Newman. But essentially, it's the story of 4 prisoners of war in the Second World War.
Oh, yes.
Who managed to carry on their bird watching exploits despite being moved around different camps and split up and not having any equipment other than a pencil and a paper. And all 4 of them ended up becoming kind of like the people who formed the very earliest bird societies in this country.
I've heard of it. Yeah, it's supposed to be a good book.
Absolutely brilliant book. I'll lend you my copy, Chris. It is really, really an absolutely cracking read. And it's kind of like, it's factual. It's not fictional. It's factual, but it does mix that kind of, bird watching with a little bit of The Great Escape as well. So, it's it's good stuff. On that note, we are going to have to finish tonight because we've actually gone on.
You haven't asked Ian what he's doing. What his What's on his agenda?
Not doing holidays, I thought it was. Go on, Ian. Any other business, Ian?
Well, I was just going to say, you talked about the robins. I had a very similar experience on Monday. We were at Rosemore, the RHS place, and the little cafe there. Instantly, there were robins around us fighting. I mean, we do look at robins through rose-tinted specs. They're quite an aggressive. Yeah, they are psychopaths, yes.
Yeah.
And they also view us as being a bit like a wild boar. They just see us as being a hairless pig, really, in the garden, as opposed to being the gardener's friend. But yeah, we had them all around us, and they were landing on the table, landing on, by us. And I always take a little packet of mealworms with me anyway, because I don't want to share my cakes. And I gave them the mealworms, and I left there with a massive smile on my face. I was delighted with it. And I'm a hard, embittered naturalist, but that sort of interaction just fills me with joy. It really does. And if people can do that and make that connection with nature, and this is kind of what seasonality is about, making that connection with nature.
Exactly.
And I talk about robins in there as well, and how they can do it. And I think I say in the book that everybody needs a robin in their lives.
Oh God, yeah. Now I'm just going to see if I can find the picture before we go today.
I'll tell you the story of the robin in our garden from a few years ago. Amazing story. Was we had a young starling, group of young starlings feeding, and a sparrowhawk, female sparrowhawk, came in, grabbed one of the starlings, pinned it down on the ground, and was literally mantling over it, and it started to actually peck it. Out of nowhere came this robin, landed on the head of the sparrowhawk and started plucking its feathers out. The sparrowhawk was so shocked it flew off.
It was gone,
yeah. I'll show you this. I'll just share this picture with you. This was one of the few photographs I ever took which actually went viral. And this was the robin that used to live in my front garden, and he was called Charlie. And he absolutely would, I'd whistle, he'd come over, I'd feed him mealworms and sunflower seeds. And he was in that front garden for probably about 3 years, which is probably the lifespan of a robin, really. But I got so many photographs of him. And every now and then I do get other robins coming into the garden, which almost feel like they're his relatives, but not quite. But he was certainly a very friendly and very inquisitive and noisy and boisterous bird. And fabulous. Once they've gone, you miss them. You really do. But you were something you just said there, Ian, and I've forgotten what it was. I was going to tag on to the end of it. No, gone.
Everybody needs a robin in their lives. I think get that connection. It's just so rewarding. It's so fulfilling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Gentlemen, afraid we are going to have to be out of time now. We've managed to rack up 2 hours tonight, which is not bad because usually we only ever do a half-hour show. So, but that's the power of having good guests and also having lots to talk about. And as ever, we do, we remain positive, don't we, Chris? There's
Absolutely.
a lot of positive things that we can do. And let's crack on and let's get it done, really. So
get some of your unique white beams in Portishead as well. You've got your round leaf white beam. It's found nowhere else on the planet other than the Portishead area. You should be out there. The council should be embracing it. It's your identity. It's your natural, your unique selling point.
We've told them.
We have told them.
We have told them. And in
Keep
fact,
banging on their door.
We've got a white beam that needs replacing, don't we, Chris?
Yes, we do.
We do.
I did send Ian those pictures of the encapsulated.
Yes.
No, we've got a white beam that does need replacing. But yes, lots to think about. But like I say, we will be, we'll be having a think about doing a soft reboot of our, our 2019 meeting, just to try and move things along a bit. Now we think we've clearly, the powers that be have tried going down a certain path. It isn't quite working, No. So it's time to have a rethink, and we can do this. We can make this work. It just requires a little bit of fine tuning, really. Absolutely. So I'm just going to say thank you to Ian Parsons for joining us tonight. Ian,
my pleasure.
we really do have to have you on this show again because it's absolutely fabulous to have somebody of your.
He's got to write another book first.
Well, no, so we can do that. Yeah. So no, honestly, we'd love to have you on, just chatting about wildlife and and your experience.
I enjoy
anyway.
Enjoy it very much.
Absolutely. A big thank you to Chris. Big thank you to everybody who's tuned in tonight. Goodness me, we had quite a lot of people watching tonight. So we'd like to say thank you to everybody who's tuned in. We will try and be back. We'll try and be back soon again, because the thing is, we didn't do one for about 6 months, and now we've done 2 in the space of like 2 weeks. So I think, Chris, we will try and do some more lives.
It's the only way to build an audience.
It's the only way to build an audience. I think we need to get out into Portishead and also do some, some actual reportage on what's actually out there. So yeah, we'll meet up. So until then, folks, thank you to everybody who's watching. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chris. We will be back very, very soon. So from us all, take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Good night. Bye.